six pillars of effective leadership. Our road to success, no other than Mr. Jim Carlough. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Jim, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
I'd be glad to. Daniel, first, thank you for having me on your broadcast here. I'm excited to be here. I am a 30 plus year leadership veteran. I've led a number of different companies in different capacities. And throughout my career, I have been blessed by having some terrific mentors and guides beside me, showing me the ropes, teaching me things. And now I get to share that with other people. I've been mentoring people on the side for about 25 years. I love doing that. But I also noticed that in many cases, they were very smart individuals. They knew what they were doing in terms of um, operational items, but they lack some of the common things that you need to know in dealing with people. And so I developed and wrote a book last year. It came out at the end of December called The Six Pillars of Effective Leadership, a Roadmap to Success. It is a book that can be utilized by existing leaders or up and coming leaders or someone who wants to get into leadership. It gives you some practical approaches using just six key characteristics or principles, and it will help you pave the way to a very, very successful leadership career. So I'm glad to be here. Let's get going.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Jim Carlough, thank you so much for sharing your book to the world. So, what are the six pillars of effective leadership outlined in the book?
So we start with integrity. To me, integrity is non negotiable. And in order for a leader to develop a committed, a high productive, um, and a trustworthy team, it starts with the leader and flows downward. And if that leader doesn't operate with absolute integrity, they will never have the trust of their team. They'll never have the loyalty of their team, and their team will not control as a group, and they'll tend to be a bunch of individuals, and the team will actually fall apart. So, to me, the first pillar is integrity. And again, it's a non negotiable pillar. After integrity comes two that people are probably very familiar with, but they're very, very different: compassion and empathy. Compassion is being able to recognize when something is going on in your life that I may be able to help you with or help you get over or resolve. Empathy is the ability for me to put myself in your shoes to be able to understand what you might be going through so that I can more effectively help you deal with that. Those are two very, very different things. Then comes focus, stability, and lastly, humor. And when I say humor, I don't mean you need to be a comedian, but humor in the sense of being able to use humor, even self deprecating humor, to be able to diffuse a situation of conflict or a situation where personalities get and voices get escalated, or simply to break the ice. A lot of times you pull a group of people together for a meeting, they may not know the agenda, stress levels will be up. The best way to break that is to add a little humor into what you're doing. So the six pillars, in each of the pillars, we tell a little story, something in my life that impacted or where I used that particular pillar. I also give practical ways to implement some of these characteristics. And I also, in each chapter, provide real world examples of leaders and leaders' names in the corporate world in America that people will recognize who use such traits in their leadership. For example, integrity, I'm not the only one who says that's non negotiable. Actually, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, it's a core principle in his leadership style. And so being able to connect those dots for a reader will help them understand that it's not just something that Jim Carlough came up with, it's something that other people recognize as being important as well. So the book's not a lengthy book. It's under 200 pages. It's easy to be able to, it's an easy read. You can read it in a weekend, but it'll allow someone a nice bit of bite-sized opportunities to improve on their own leadership. The other thing I get across in the book is we often hear the notion born leaders, and I don't believe that to be true. I think leaders are developed. In fact, I'm a perfect example of that. My parents weren't leaders of companies, but I am. But I learned to be a leader and I developed those traits. In fact, I believe leadership is a never ending journey, and we're always learning and evolving in our leadership capabilities. I am a very different leader today than I was 30 years ago. In fact, when I look back on how I led 30 years ago, I'm surprised I even made it out of that first level of leadership. But anyway, be that as it may, that's an overview of the 6 pillars and how people can use them. What else can I answer for you today, Daniel?
Beautifully articulated, Mr. Jim. Very well said. So, what are some common leadership mistakes that the book warns against?
6 points of leadership are integrity, compassion, empathy, focus, stability, and humor.
That's awesome. So, did you suggest something that against of those pillars?
Say that again. I didn't quite understand what you said.
So, you wrote the book for 6 pillars. So, did you suggest that against of those 6 pillars?
So I started with a list of about 12. And
Okay.
I said to myself, if I wrote a book about 12 pillars, it would be too much to consume. So I wanted to narrow my focus into what I thought were my most important characteristics or traits that I could pass on to another leader that would not only be easy to implement but would be impactful as well. And so now that doesn't mean the other 6 aren't important. They are,
Yes.
but not as important as the first 6. I mean, integrity, as I said, is non-negotiable. If you can't have that, the structure falls apart. In fact, integrity is so important. I don't even think it's a pillar. I think it's the base of the building, the foundation. And then the other pillars stand on top of that. But I think these 6 are the most important in my view, and the ones that for the people that I mentor, I emphasize the most of.
So, Mr. Jim, how does the book describe the role of vision in leadership?
In terms of vision, vision is a combination of focus and stability. So when you think about vision, vision is the story to get people motivated to implement the direction and the strategy that you want to utilize or to go after. But I believe that they're built upon by focus and by stability. I'll give you 2 examples. If you were to think of a person who runs a business today that is the biggest business in that universe or in that industry, I think of Amazon and Jeff Bezos. For 20 plus years, he's had a singular focus of being the dominant retailer and deliverer of goods to people's homes. He sells more than Walmart, he sells more than Target, he sells more than, I mean, everything. He had at the very beginning many years of lackluster sales, but his focus never changed. His focus was to continue to be competitive and to buy and to deliver things to people's homes so that they didn't have to get in the car to go get them. That singular piece of focus allowed him the success that he's now enjoying. When I think of stability, I think of another winner in the United States, Warren Buffett. If you
True.
think about Warren Buffett, he takes and finds assets or businesses that are undervalued and changes that and makes them valuable and makes them extremely profitable. I stumbled upon Warren Buffett in a conversation not long ago where a friend of mine was telling me about a car dealership that was being sold. And she said to me, the only person that could afford that car dealership is Warren Buffett. And I laughed. I said, Berkshire Hathaway doesn't own car dealerships, they're into other things. And she said, au contraire. And we live in the Dallas, Texas area. And she said, they own dealerships in this market. I took out my phone, I opened up Google, and I Googled Berkshire Hathaway owned car dealerships near me. It lit up like a Christmas tree. There were 10 or 15 car dealerships in my backyard that are owned by Warren Buffett's company. Who would have thought that? But that singular sense of stability of buying depreciable asset or depreciated assets, turning them around, making them profitable, and bringing that into his organization. I was embarrassed that I didn't know it because I live here. And two, I was amazed at what he had amassed just in this market and probably unbeknownst to a lot of people. I know if I didn't know it, I've told this to a number of people since I learned of it, and they're like, nah, you're kidding me. I say, open up your phone. People open up their phone, they Google it, and sure enough, there they see all of these car dealerships around the Dallas area that are owned by Berkshire Hathaway. So he uses a stable principle and just repeats it over time. So when you combine the focus and the stability of both of those two men, you can see how that can allow you to get that vision of where you want to be and that visionary aspect, and people will join that convoy and support that with you.
Certainly. Focus, stability, and consistency, people, is the key. So, Mr. Jim, what strategies does the book suggest for improving decision making skills?
In terms of improving decision making skills, I'm a firm believer in having as much data points as possible and not shooting from the hip and making rash decisions. In fact, I tell my team all the time, and I mean no disrespect to any surgeons that are out there, but in the technology world, I tell my team what we're doing is not open heart surgery. Nobody's going to die if we wait and try to get additional information in order to make the right decision. So, what I tell people to do in decision making is make sure that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's and have enough information to know that you're making, at least on a calculated basis, the best decision. Lee Iacocca, when he ran Chrysler, he made it a point of saying, I will make decisions with 75% of the information because the other 25% isn't going to change my view. I'm not sure I subscribe to that because there may be something in that additional 25% that would change your approach or might change your mind. So I like to make sure that outline what it is we need to know in order to make the decision, and then have the majority of those things identified to make more practical and more decisive and more decisions that don't have to be reversed later on.
Certainly. Totally agree, Mr. Jim. And why is emotional intelligence a key component of leadership, according to your book?
When I think of emotional intelligence, I start to wrap my head around the personality of people, the emotion of people, and there's such a focus on mental health in this country today, and rightfully so. It has been ignored for so long. but being able to understand the psychological side of human nature and and really how people respond and react to things will allow you to be a better leader, to be a better promoter of those individuals who you're working with, and you get to know them as human aspects, or human, you humanize it as opposed to treating them as employees and more like teammates and family members.
Certainly. And Mr. Jim, what would be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
My long-term goal would be able to bring this message and to continue to write and speak and develop leaders so that everyone is doing everything they can to have high performing and high producing teams. One of the things that I cringe on, and I've seen it in my own career, is when a leader simply changes the positions of people simply to hide their inefficiencies or their failures as leaders. I think if we're going to lead and lead into the future, we have to lead with integrity, and we have to be able to promote that amongst our ranks and amongst the people that we work with. Again, to me, integrity is non-negotiable. And I think it right now where we are in America, we could use more integrity in business.
Indeed, Mr. Jim, indeed. So, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to be an effective leadership?
Couple of things. I would say jump in with both feet. The water's warm. It's not as hard as people think it is, but you do have to understand how to motivate people and how to deal with people. And I would say also, if you're in leadership, don't give up. You don't ever want to give up or give in. And the secret to success is to never let up and never let down. So, my counsel to people is jump in with both feet, operate with intense integrity, and get ready for a long and successful career. That would be my message.
Well, Mr. Jim, thank you for your advice and good luck to your goals. And we are looking forward for more empowering books like this. So, what personal development habits does the book recommend for continuous leadership growth?
One of the things that I'm very big on is journaling. I take a lot of notes and I reflect on those notes and I save them. There's lots of ways to do that today. You can do them right into your computer in Microsoft Notes or in any type of WordPad type of device, or you can take them the old fashioned way in a ledger or a journal or a day timer, as an example. But I'm a firm believer that we do not have the capacity to remember absolutely everything. And so I believe that the most successful leaders are going to be those that can remember and remember where they journaled that situation so they can reflect upon it in the future. And so journaling is one of the habits that I talk about in several places of the book that has helped me as a leader as well. Because this interaction today, Daniel, you and I hadn't met before, but there's things about this relationship or this meeting that I'm going to want to remember, and I'm going to journal those, and those will have a place in the future. And it's no different than if you and I were in a business meeting. There's things that will come out in normal discussion that are important, maybe about your family or about your background. And I'm going to want to be attuned to that. So being a good listener, being a good journaler, and not being afraid to take that next step in terms of being able to circle back to those items later.
Very well said, Mr. Jim. Very well said. So, how can leaders measure their success in applying their six pillars?
I think they can measure their success in a couple of ways. Number one, the commitment and loyalty of the teams that they support. But I would venture to guess and very much believe that if you follow the six key ingredients in my book, your attrition rate will be the lowest in your organization. My attrition rate and employees who voluntarily leave me is extremely low, in the low single digits. And I believe it's because of my leadership style and the way that I help them be successful.
So, Mr. Jim, can you give us three successful leader that you adore?
The most successful leader that I worked with directly was Ross Perot. I worked at Perot Systems for nearly a decade. He was an amazing leader, and one that I have always had a lot of admiration for. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he was an individual who um, came from very small beginnings, became a very, very wealthy man, but never forgot where he came from and was always giving back to people who were in need. And he was probably the most impactful leader I had ever worked with. That same organization produced a number of strong leaders who followed Mr. Perot's model. I'm happy to be able to say some of those have mentored me, and I would categorize them in that same regard. Um, in addition to that, I've had the luxury of working for some very, very large organizations, some publicly traded, and there have been a number of leaders in that regard that have helped me. I worked for a number of years with health management systems, and a woman by the name of Christina Dragonetti. Still consider her a top tier leader and somebody I have immense respect for. Also from that organization was Maria Perrin, another person that I have a strong regard and respect for. And these were very, very passionate women who were able to get the job done and able to develop very strong, trustworthy, effective teams that allowed us to dramatically increase the size of HMS.
Indeed, Mr. Jim. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Mental Health 101, in its first season. People, first season with my co-host, Mr. G. Mick Smith. So please do listen, Mental Health 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, what is the book final message or a key takeaway for readers looking to improve their leadership skills?
The one big takeaway is it is implementable. I tell people when they pick up a book, don't try to implement it, because that book may have given that person individual success at a company at a specific time. I believe these principles that I put forth will transcend time and are core principles enough that in totality will make a significant impact on somebody's leadership capabilities, skill set, and also following. So that would be the one big takeaway. It's worth the read.
Certainly, Mr. Jim Carlough. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And like I said, we are looking forward for more and more and more empowering books like this. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Absolutely. My book is available on Amazon and also on Barnes and Noble. You can also get it through my website, www.jimcarlough.com. And so if you ever want to reach out, contact me through my website. Be more than happy to talk and or give you counsel and help you grow and develop as a leader.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Jim Carlough because if you support him, as I said, more and more and more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Jim, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
More to come, people. See you soon.